The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain from the storm outside. Emily Carter, a 29-year-old nurse, had just finished a grueling double shift when she was called into room 407. Inside lay an elderly man, frail, pale, and struggling for breath. His name was Henry Lawson. No flowers on the bedside table. No visitors. Just the quiet hum of machines and the occasional beep of a heart monitor. "Is there anyone you'd like me to call?" Emily asked gently. Henry shook his head slowly. No family left. No one to care. She could have simply checked his vitals and left. But something in his eyes, tired, sad, but still searching, made her pull up a chair. She held his hand. And in that moment, the sterile hospital room became a place of humanity. What Emily didn't know was that Henry Lawson wasn't just another lonely patient. He was a billionaire. And what happened over the next few days would change her life in ways she never imagined. If you believe kindness can rewrite destinies, stay with this story to the very last second. Because what Emily did next, without even knowing it, would turn her world upside down. Henry Lawson's chart was grim. Stage 4 cancer, lungs weakening by the day, and a prognosis that gave him weeks, maybe days, left to live. Most of the staff treated him with polite efficiency, but there was an unspoken assumption: he wouldn't be here long. Emily, however, couldn't bring herself to treat him like a fading case file. Every evening, after her rounds, she'd slip into room 407, not because she had to, but because something about Henry's quiet loneliness pulled at her. She was exhausted. Rent was overdue. Her bank account barely scraped 3 digits after paying off her student loans. On her breaks, she'd scroll through job postings, wondering if she could pick up extra shifts at another hospital. Yet even on the nights when her feet ached and her back screamed, she'd still stop by Henry's room. Sometimes, they sat in silence. Other times, Henry would tell stories. Not about yachts or boardrooms, but about fishing trips as a boy, the dog he once had, or how he used to watch the sunrise with his late wife, Margaret. One rainy night, Emily found him coughing violently, unable to reach his water. She steadied him, wiped his brow, and stayed until he fell back asleep. As she turned to leave, she noticed something. Henry's eyes were glistening. "You remind me of her," he whispered. "Of who?" Emily asked softly. "My wife. She had that same way of making the world feel safe." Emily didn't know why his words lodged so deeply in her chest. But she knew one thing. No matter how tired she was, she couldn't walk away from this man. Over the next few weeks, Henry and Emily's conversations deepened. What began as small talk about the weather and hospital meals evolved into something far more personal. Henry had no children, no surviving siblings, and, Emily would later learn, no one who visited. The other nurses assumed he preferred it that way, but Emily sensed the truth. He had simply outlived everyone who mattered. She started bringing him little things from home. A small plant to sit on the windowsill. A paperback novel she'd just finished. On nights when Henry couldn't sleep, Emily would read aloud, her voice soft, steady, filling the sterile hospital air with the warmth of an old friend. One night, during a particularly brutal rainstorm, Henry asked, "Emily, do you believe in regrets?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but I also believe in second chances." Henry stared out the window for a long moment. "I've made more money than I could ever spend. But I traded away time. Time with my wife. Time with the life we could have had." His voice cracked. "I thought I had forever. I didn't." Emily reached for his hand. "Then maybe this time, whatever time you have left, you can make it mean something." Henry looked at her like she'd just handed him something more valuable than all his wealth. And as the days went by, their routine became sacred. Emily would finish her shift, and without fail, she'd be in room 407. They'd talk about life, loss, dreams, and the quiet moments that made it all worthwhile. Henry began smiling more, eating more, asking the doctor's questions. It was as if her presence breathed a little fight back into him. But what Emily didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Henry Lawson was beginning to make a decision. A decision that would change her life forever. It happened on a Tuesday. Emily was halfway through her rounds when she heard raised voices coming from room 407. She rushed in to find Henry arguing with a man in an expensive suit, his lawyer. "I said I don't care what the board thinks," Henry was saying, his voice hoarse but fierce. "It's my money, my choice." The lawyer noticed Emily and quickly left, muttering something about finalizing paperwork. Emily frowned. "Henry, what was that about?" He gave her a sly smile. "Oh, just making some plans." But over the next few days, she noticed changes. A steady stream of legal documents. Long conversations with men in suits. Henry asking her strange, personal questions about her life, her family, her dreams. One evening, after she'd told him how she sometimes skipped meals so her paycheck would stretch further for rent, Henry was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know, Emily, I don't think people like you get the recognition they deserve. You care for people, give them dignity, and you do it without expecting anything back." She shrugged. "It's my job." "No," he said firmly. "It's who you are." Something about the way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. Later that week, Henry grew weaker. The doctors told Emily quietly that he likely had only days left. She found herself lingering longer by his bedside, holding his hand even after he'd fallen asleep. On the last night before everything changed, Henry asked her to promise one thing. "Don't give up on yourself, Emily. Life. It can surprise you when you least expect it." She nodded, fighting tears. The next morning, Henry Lawson was gone. Emily thought she'd never see him, or hear his voice, again. But within 48 hours, a sealed envelope arrived at her tiny apartment. Inside was a single handwritten note, and a revelation that would take her breath away. Emily sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the cream-colored envelope in her hands. Her name, Emily Carter, was written in careful, shaky script. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Henry. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, there was just one folded piece of paper and a smaller envelope stamped with the logo of a law firm she'd never heard of. She unfolded the letter first. "Emily," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I've finally gone to wherever old men go when their time is up. I don't have many regrets, but one is that I didn't meet you sooner. You reminded me of the only person who ever cared for me when I had nothing. My mother. You treated me like a human being, not a wallet or a dying man. I have no family left, no children, no one to pass my life's work to. So I've made a decision. The enclosed letter from my lawyer will explain the details. Just remember, this is not charity. This is my way of saying thank you for being the only real friend I've had in decades." Emily's vision blurred as she reached for the second envelope. Her breath caught when she read the words inside. Henry Lawson, billionaire industrialist, the kind of man whose name graced skyscrapers, had left his entire estate, valued at over $4 billion, to her. She dropped the papers to the table, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might faint. $4 billion. For a moment, she thought it must be a mistake. She had no idea Henry was that wealthy. He had never once flaunted it, never acted like the tycoon the media described. But it was real. The lawyer's letter was clear. She was now the sole heir. Emily's hands covered her face as sobs shook her shoulders. Not for the money, but for the man she'd lost. She whispered to the empty room, "Thank you, Henry. I hope I made you proud." And just like that, the broke nurse who had once skipped meals was thrust into a life she could never have imagined. But Henry's gift would do more than change her bank account. It would change the lives of thousands of people, because Emily already knew exactly what she would do next. Emily didn't rush out to buy a mansion or luxury car. She didn't fly to Paris or fill her closets with designer clothes. Instead, she sat in Henry's empty hospital room one last time, her fingers brushing over the worn armchair where she had sat beside him so many nights. She thought about his quiet laugh, his dry humor, the way his eyes softened when he spoke about his mother. Henry's fortune wasn't just money, it was trust. It was a responsibility. So Emily made a decision. The first thing she did was pay off the crushing medical debt of 3 patients she'd grown close to during her years as a nurse. People who, like Henry, had no family to lean on. Then she set up the Lawson Foundation, named not for herself, but for the man who had taught her that kindness leaves the deepest mark. The foundation funded free palliative care for terminally ill patients who couldn't afford it. Every ward Emily visited now had warm blankets, music, and volunteer companions. No one would die alone if she could help it. She even had a special program for struggling nurses, covering their education costs and giving them stipends so they wouldn't have to choose between caring for others and feeding themselves. News outlets caught wind of her story, the broke nurse who inherited a fortune from a dying patient. They wanted sound bites, headlines, scandal. But Emily always said the same thing. It's not about the money. It's about what you do with the time you have, and the people you choose to see when the world looks away. Years later, standing on the stage of a healthcare conference, Emily told Henry's story one more time. And in the front row sat dozens of people whose lives had been touched by his gift. People she'd never met, but who now carried pieces of his legacy forward. Emily ended her speech with the same words she wished she could tell Henry in person. You gave me more than wealth. You gave me purpose. And I promise, I'll never waste it. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still exists. Like this video, subscribe for more true stories, and be part of spreading the kind of compassion Henry believed in. Because one day, you might be the stranger who changes someone's life forever.